Okay, Susan, we are recording and we've got all of our reporters in the room, so we're ready to go.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Senator Murray and guests. My name is Susan Hempstead. I'm the Assistant Director of Strategic Relations at Snow Isle Libraries, dual county library district in Snohomish and Island counties, and I'll be moderating our conversation today. By way of introduction for everybody, Senator Murray is chair of the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pension, and a member of the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator, all of us, thank you for your leadership and your advocacy leading the Digital Equity Act and the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act to expand equitable broadband access. For our program today, we're going to hear from the senator and also public library and school representatives as we all stand in the middle of the digital divide, providing access to broadband, devices, and also digital literacy skills. So Senator Murray, over to you. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is joining this call. Thank you for all the work you do in your communities to support them. Today, we're talking about broadband. And in 2022, it is just past time that we think about high-speed internet like we do running water or electricity. We all have to have it. I have been pushing for better broadband access since actually before the pandemic, but it really wasn't until COVID-19 hit that we really got everyone's ears to really perk up on this issue. So I'm so glad we are here today to be able to talk about some of the major investments in high-speed internet and digital inclusion that we put into the American Rescue Plan and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which finally put us firmly on the path towards universal broadband. It's going to help cut costs and finally bridge that digital divide. I'm very excited to hear more about how American Rescue Plan dollars are still at work getting our communities connected, which you will all hear today. In fact, I want you to know just recently, my office announced $96 million in American Rescue Plan funding for more than 200 Washington State school districts and libraries all over our state, including in Snohomish, Yakima, and Grace Harbors County. We will continue to see the impact of the American Rescue Plan as state and local governments are then able to use very flexible relief dollars for connectivity. And the Washington State Broadband Office is hard at work distributing grants from the Capital Projects Fund. And the even better news is a lot more help is on the way, thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is a priority for me because I have heard too many heartbreaking stories about students driving to gas stations or truck stops just to do their homework. That is finally going to change thanks to the bills we passed last year. Washington State will receive a minimum allocation of $100 million to help provide broadband coverage across the state through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That's estimated to provide access to at least 241,000 people in the state who currently lack it. And we can expect to see a lot more money for broadband deployment in the future. And you know, this doesn't get talked about often enough, but the bill will also help lower prices for internet service by taking 4 very important steps. First, requiring funding recipients to offer a low-cost, affordable plan. Secondly, requiring providers to display what we are calling a broadband nutrition label that will help our families actually comparison shop for a better deal. Third, by boosting competition in areas where existing providers are not providing adequate service. And this last one is going to be a really huge deal for families. The White House has estimated about 19% of people living in Washington State, that's 1.4 million people, are eligible for what is called the Affordable Connectivity Benefit. That benefit will provide $30 per month to help make sure families in Washington State can get connected to reliable high-speed internet, and up to $75 per month on certain tribal lands where broadband access is especially limited. This is a permanent program, and it's going to make a big difference, and it is already up and running. So now we've just got to get the word out. I'm also very excited to say my Digital Equity Act legislation that I actually introduced back in 2019 is now law. That bill will help make sure everyone can actually make the most of an internet connection once they have it. Because in addition to being able to get the internet on the internet, you need to have the skills, devices, supports necessary to use it. And we would do this by establishing 2 grant programs that will be administered by the federal government. First of all, establishing a 5-year, $300 million per year formula grant program to fund digital equity efforts by all 50 states. And second, my bill sends resources directly to local communities and creates a 5-year, $250 million per year competitive grant program to support digital inclusion projects undertaken by individual groups or local governments, like our local libraries or our school districts or our local nonprofits. You'll hear from some today. We know that digital inclusion interventions look really different for every community, from organizations who provide low or no cost internet connected devices to digital literacy and workforce development classes. That flexibility and focus on local solutions was really important to me as I drafted this legislation. Now, there's a lot more to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but I want to have a chance today to hear from everyone who's on this about how those American Rescue Plan dollars are being implemented, and more about the local challenges and successes around broadband, so I can make sure I am doing everything possible to fight for our state and the other Washington. So Susan and all of you, thank you so much for taking the time today. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much. This is a great news call. I think everyone here has experienced the challenges that you identified, and the federal program support is going to be tremendous in moving us all forward. Right now, it's my honor to introduce Jorge Castillo, CEO of Inspire of Washington State. Jorge.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Senator. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jorge Castillo, as you heard. I am the CEO for Inspire Development Centers. And I have had the pleasure of serving children and families for the past 20 years through our Head Start, Migrant Seasonal Head Start, and State ECAP programs. I'm a lifelong resident of Granger, and I'm very familiar with small towns with limited capacity in broadband. Thank you for this opportunity to share what we've been doing to also bridge the digital gap for our families and our children. There's a very real struggle for adequate and affordable connectivity in the rural areas we serve in. Prior to the pandemic, Inspire was continuously focused on improving our network connectivity with our centers throughout the state. In 2020, when the pandemic began, we at Inspire invested over $1 million of CARES Act funding by purchasing 343 laptops, 32 servers, 111 Wi-Fi access points, and 106 switches for our centers. This investment provided significantly improved infrastructure at our centers and allowed for staff to work remotely while serving children remotely under emergency circumstances. We also utilized the CARES Act funding to purchase 485 tablets with built-in internet and early learning apps. These tablets were and are still being used by our pre-K children when we provide remote learning. In 2021, Inspire received a funding commitment of $261,000 in E-rate funds, allowing us to significantly improve our internet connectivity at 24 of our 27 centers with new fiber internet connections. We're pending funding for 3 more of our schools currently. Our recently improved infrastructure, though, allowed us to take full advantage of that new fiber internet connection. Also in 2021, Inspire received a funding commitment of $339,000 through the Emergency Connectivity Fund. This funding was used to purchase 1,048 iPads to be utilized by children during remote learning and in the classrooms. All devices that we've purchased facilitate learning have been configured to limit access to the prescribed learning objectives only. Teachers also utilize these iPads to document the progress of children in the classroom and in remote settings. In a few of the communities we serve, access to internet services are non-existent for our families, and to complicate this, cellular service is also extremely limited or non-existent. In our preschool settings, we believe there is no substitute for in-person learning. However, broadband internet services has benefits that are far-reaching students. I apologize. That are far-reaching for our students and at all ages and in emergency circumstances. We continue to look for these opportunities of funding to make broadband accessible for our families, and we look forward to what's to come.
Thank you, Jorge. I think
Thank you.
one of the programs you mentioned, the federal FCC USAC E-rate program and the support that it provides to both public libraries and schools is invaluable, and their flexibility and investment in the emergency broadband benefit, and as the senator mentioned, affordable connectivity program has had huge impacts, and we appreciate how they've moved forward. It's now my privilege to introduce Joey Castillo, Superintendent of the Maddington School District, who is joining us via phone today.
Yes, good afternoon. Yep, this is Dr. Joey Castillo. I'm the Superintendent of Maddington School District and a proud Yakima Valley boy. Jorge was from Granger. I was from his rival down the road. I grew up in Zilla. I didn't go too far. I'm very proud educator in the Valley. I've been in Maddington for about 4 years now. And a little bit about Maddington. There's a lot of people that have lived in the Valley a long time and have never actually driven to Maddington. We're just about, 8 minutes from Sunnyside off of I-82. We have 2 schools that serve about 815 students, 98% Latino. We have 44% of our families are ELL, receiving EL services, 94% low income, and a little more than a quarter of our families are migrants, so a lot of moving around and whatnot. The digital divide and the dream of someday going one-to-one with devices was exactly that for us, a dream prior to the pandemic. And so when the pandemic did hit, we were in emergency mode, just for the sheer fact that we just weren't prepared for that. When you're a little district like us, you piece and puzzled together funds. And so the acts that were put into place to fund digital access early on and throughout the pandemic have been an absolute godsend. Probably the highlights I'd like to point out, we added 600 Chromebooks to our fleet, and that actually put a computer in front of every single child all the way down through preschool. We were able to add 600 hotspots. Where we are, we do have fairly good service to the town of Maddington, but the majority of our square mileage is not within the incorporated town of Maddington. It's up the ridge, up the hill, and it's never been cost effective for internet service providers to provide internet out there. So hotspots was the solution at the time, and I would consider temporary, but it worked out. Some innovative things that we did early on was we installed some drive up hotspots so families could drive up. That was really early in the process and worked out, but it wasn't ideal because you still had to get to the parking lot to do that. But at that time, it was really the only option because hotspots were a hot commodity at that point. So it took us a little while to get those. Another one that I think is kind of neat is Wi-Fi on school buses. So we have kids that spend 45 minutes to an hour on a school bus going home. And so there's internet access. And on the surface, that's one piece to it. But the other thing that they can do is if we ever have to go remote again, we can strategically park school buses in certain neighborhoods, and that access would be available to families that way. So that's kind of in short what the funds did for us. I want to thank Senator Murray for her support and really all of Washington, the other Washington, as she says, for their support in this. And I want to continue to root them on to press further, especially when we think about it in terms of infrastructure, because we really need wires on the lines and in the ground to make this a permanent fix. And I think that we're really going in the right direction. If there is anything positive about a pandemic, it's that it woke us up to this need. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. I think we all innovated quickly, and with the federal resources, that has helped us move even farther. I think our school district partners are vital collaborators and contributors in advancing digital equity, including digital and information literacy. We know those are big issues for our school district partners as well. I'd now like to introduce Eric Smith, Technology, Student Data, and Assessment Director for the Elma School District.
Hello and good afternoon. It's an honor to share with you all today. And as mentioned, I've served in the rural community of Elma for over 30 or just about 30 years now. And I can attest to the impact of these past 3 years in our district. And I just want to highlight the fact that the catalyst of COVID mixed with the access to these federal rescue dollars has really facilitated a growth that might have taken us a decade or more in a pre-pandemic world. And so I'm going to go a little bit beyond. I apologize. I thought we were also talking about more that we use the funds for besides just the broadband. So I'm going to share a little bit of that because we do know that the education reform is a slow-moving ship, but COVID did not give us the grace of time for that. So we definitely had some areas that were intensely spotlighted that everyone else has mentioned as well, and more also not beyond the digital access in our overall education model. And so we know that we can't go back to normal, and because normal doesn't necessarily work for all of our students. So in Elma, we've used these federal funds to support 3 key spending priorities. That we first had to establish the people and resources needed to ensure our students' health and safety, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So we did start a virtual learning academy, and for students that needed that at the time and still need that environment. Additional health monitoring staff, and perhaps more importantly, we purchased a software system that provided 24-hour-a-day alerts for any self-harm or student safety-related concerns online while the students are using our devices, whether at school or at home. And our staff have been incredibly grateful for this and the prevention that it provides early, for tragic events. Beyond the health and safety, we've used these funds just focusing on several new learning initiatives, and we're in the process of just a collective shift to look at where we may be, broke, inequitable, and underperforming for some of our students. We also serve a high, low-income community, 70%. And so with the federal dollars, we're really beginning significant strides towards 5 key initiatives: universal digital design for learning, just really giving all students an equal opportunity to succeed. Our pre-K readiness, partnering with our early learning partners, mastery-based learning, and we are really excited for that. We've been working with the State Board of Education in 18 other schools, and social emotional learning, as we mentioned, and the successful post-graduation placement for our students with the career and college readiness. Finally, I just want to speak to the use of funds centered around our digital access for our students. As mentioned, the E-rate emergency connectivity funds was huge for us. It allows us to reach a one-to-one model compared to our pre-COVID shortages where we were sharing carts of devices between classrooms and students. And I'll just never forget that, like mentioned earlier, when we had to do the first device checkout, we literally had 4 lanes of cars weaving all the way through our high school parking lot, and families just anxiously awaiting, hoping that when they got to the end of the line that there would be a device for them. And if there was multiple children in the family, we still were only able to give them 1 device. So these federal rescue funds have been huge for us to push us to that one-to-one. But we still knew that even as we were sending those families away with the device, that a lot of them lacked reliable internet access at home. And so that's still a huge hurdle for us. Even with mobile hotspots and things like that, we know that infrastructure needs to be built out in order to reach all of our families, no matter where they live. And just in closing, as the tech director of a small school district, I'm really thankful how far we've come in just short order. And it could not have been done without the federal rescue funds for us. I know the reality is, though, that within a short time, there's still going to be needed resources in order to continue the really great work that we started. So we are asking that those things be continued to be prioritized. And again, just thank you for allowing me to share how we got here, our vision for the future. On behalf of our community, Senator Murray and your staff, we thank you so much for your advocacy for all of our students, not just here in our community of Elma, but across the state and across the nation.
Eric, thank you so much. And thank you for the focus on social and emotional well-being for our students and all members of our community. It's now my honor to introduce my boss, Lois Langer-Thompson, who's the Executive Director of Snow Isle Libraries.
Thank you. Unlike my colleagues, I can't claim to be a lifelong Washingtonian, but as a recent transplant, I am now a proud Washingtonian. And I will say, just on a personal note, that I was moving to a high-tech area, and it never occurred to me that even in some highly populated areas, I would want to ask if there was high-speed internet access to my home. And that was a surprise to me that it wasn't that wasn't common here. So I appreciate the work personally as well. But libraries support digital equity through access at all libraries across the state. And I want to thank you, Senator Murray, for your ongoing commitment and support to digital equity. In libraries, we see the impact to individuals, families, and communities that do not have reliable, affordable, and accessible internet. This is true in our rural communities, but also impacts more densely populated communities. Public libraries serve as a critical access point, and our staff are trained to help customers navigate a complex digital world through cybersecurity, online medical and financial resources, and job applications and business support. And the financial support through ARPA and CARES for digital navigators for libraries across the state is critical to that effort. Recently, at one of our libraries, a customer brought in his entire desktop computer to use the internet in order to run his business. This isn't sustainable or a very effective method for business owners. Public libraries can be an access point, but we cannot be the infrastructure for the state. Running a business, telehealth appointments, job interviews, and other confidential use need internet access in homes and businesses. As a reference point, in 2021, Snow Isle Libraries hosted 1.5 million Wi-Fi sessions through our libraries. These happened in buildings and in parking lots. And as noted, the parking lot can be a great place to check your email and to do a quick check, but it is not the place to do a job interview, your homework, to talk to your doctor. But that enhanced extension of and strengthening of the Wi-Fi to our parking lots was paid through ARPA and CARES funding. Also through the ARPA and CARES Act funding, we purchased laptops and Wi-Fis for checkout. These have been extremely popular, but again, serve as a stopgap measure, and as noted, do not always provide reliable access when you're outside of good cell service. It does leave some of our communities outside of the reach of Wi-Fi service, and long-term, it is not financially sustainable. But public libraries are a partner for federal, state, and local government and community-based organizations to support equitable access to online resource. And one last note I want to make is that our lives do not start and stop at city or county lines. So thank you, Senator Murray, for your leadership and support for funding at the federal level that moves us toward ubiquitous high-speed internet that is reliable, affordable, and accessible for all, and then leads to the successful implementation at the local level to support access for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. I think that's exactly right. Online and also library buildings as a service, and the work that staff are also providing in building as people connect the way they want. Senator Murray, thank you for this conversation. Our public libraries and schools are supporting communities through the federal programs that you have championed and led. We're thrilled for this conversation and the investments that are coming to support the work of our public library and school partners. And we'd love to turn it back to you for additional thoughts on what you've heard today.
Well, let me just thank all of you. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Oftentimes we vote for policies or vote for legislation or vote for funding and don't hear the real impact. And what you said reinforced exactly what I know. We've got to get internet connectivity to everyone. It's about personal health and education and businesses and families connecting, but we also have to make sure that it is flexible funding because every community is different. And just hearing how all of you have used this in different ways is really impressive. I love the Wi-Fi on buses. I love the use for mental health. The fact that a business owner came into a library to run his business just says we have made headway, but we've got a lot more work to do. And knowing how you have all used this will help me continue to make this a federal priority in every way. So thank you all for what you're doing. I look forward to continuing to be your partner in the U.S. Senate in that other Washington, but you are doing the real work at home on the ground, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Thank you to all of our panelists and